Basically, I'll introduce myself and give a little bit of my background, not too long, but just a little. And then we will go into new product development. Basically, we'll talk about all the phases. Generally, a normal medical device company has to go through to create a brand new product and take it all the way to the customer. Once we have done that, we will come and talk to you about the kind of projects you'd like to do to bring your device into market. Because ultimately, that is my goal, that all of you get encouraged with what I've talked about to build your own medical device. Just a little bit about myself. I did my engineering in India. And then the first 15 years I spent traveling all over India on projects, as well as the Middle East. I was in Saudi Arabia and Iraq before I came to the US in 1988. And once I came to the US in 1988, I started working for some Department of Energy projects. They were mechanical engineering projects in the Columbia, Maryland area. And then I came to the Midwest, and from 94 to 2000 worked with the local companies as a design engineer, as a plant automation engineer. And since the year 2001, I have been with medical device companies. It's been a very fruitful 25 years where I worked with quite a number of companies in the full life cycle, right from the beginning to the end. I was fortunate that I was able to get a chance to work right from the paper napkin stage till the way it went to the customer, or till the time the company was acquired by another company because of the product we made. And I probably worked for most of the medical device companies in the US, right from people like top dogs like Medtronic to other smaller companies. So I worked with startups, I worked with medium-sized companies, and for larger companies. So that's a little bit about myself. Now we will go to my goal. Whenever I go for a seminar like this, I have a small goal for myself. I'm sure you would have come with a certain goal. And my goal is, by the end of the day, not the end of the day, but you are encouraged. At least two people bring their product ideas to market. That is my goal, because uh, generally the idea is people think medical devices are hard to make. And that is why in the beginning, I would have said the art of medical device manufacturing. That's the reason I say art is there is a hard way and there is an easy way. So, as engineers, with all the tools available today, I think we can actually make very smart decisions and make it easy on us. The key is the idea. Getting the idea is the most difficult thing. Once you have the idea and you can find a customer who likes the idea, the rest of it, I think, is easy. And not everybody realizes that. Many times, medical device companies fail, products fail, they come back. But it's really a certain specified process. If you follow that process, you cannot fail. And that is my goal. So let us go into what is the normal new product development process in a medical device company. If you really, as we finish this, you will find it's really common sense, because anytime you create a product, you need an idea, right? You start with the concept and feasibility. You have identified a need, and you look at the technology which can make it happen. And then you make a small feasibility study and show a proof of concept that it will work, because it is at that time you can go to your management. I'll tell them, look, I think this product will work. I think I can make it work. And I think this is how much I need. I need $30 million from you, and I'll give it to you in 2 years. Again, I actually worked on one of the projects like this, where we made a diabetes test sensor. And I had a very brilliant manager, one of the best I've ever worked with. He brought in brand new technology to the company, and we started with actually putting it down on a paper napkin. Then we took it all the way to the end, and I was with that company for about 6 years. Right from beginning to end, it's one of the beautiful experience to see the thing grow, and in between people will come and tell you this won't work, or but then you have to have hope. As engineers, we say everything can work, right? With the right engineering, anything can be made to work. So we start with that. That is the first phase. And this is the most interesting phase. And once you have done this phase, you have to go to the next phase, which is called the user requirements, because you really have to nail it down. ultimately, what does the user, when I say the user is the patient who will use your product, what are they looking for? And what are you looking for in terms of bringing it to that point? So you really, it's like a plan. You write about the user requirements. It's a specification. You talk about user needs, the intended use, and a design plan to make it happen. So once this is all done, you're ready to get the work done. So we talk about, in medical device companies, they talk about inputs and outputs. What this really means is, to get to your final drawing, you need some inputs, right? You have to specify what are the functional specifications of your product. You like to talk about safety requirements. And if I'm going too fast, let me know. I will slow down a little.
No,
And then we have the regulatory requirements. Thank you. So these are the design inputs. Of course, later on down the game, I will go more into detail into these 10 modules. So once you have done the design inputs, you're ready to go and do the design. So this is when you have your prototype. Again, exciting time. You really you get to look at what your product is going to really look like. You have the final drawings. You have all the documents and all that is required to manufacture it. However, at this point, once you have done this, they have a phase what is called design verification. At this point, what you're really doing is, you have got a certain output, like your drawing, and when you go and verify through testing that the product meets those specifications. Number one is, your prototype looks like the drawing. Number two is, whatever functions the equipment should have or the process should have, you're able to see it. So this is called design verification. You're actually confirming it through testing. Now, the next stage is called design validation. One of the questions you may have is, what is the difference between design verification and design validation? Medical device companies are very fond of these terms. However, in simple terms, it's really, when you come to validation, you're ensuring that it meets the user needs. Whereas verification, you're ensuring that your outputs you're testing, but here you want to be sure that it meets the user needs, and that is the design validation phase. Once all this is done, in the olden days, they would just throw the drawings to the shop floor and say, make it. And not anymore, because that doesn't really, it's not really easy for the manufacturer to know what the design engineers want, right? The design engineers have a certain dream, but then if you don't give the manufacturer team the correct instructions, they won't be able to make it. So we have a certain phase called the design transfer phase, and I'm sort of an expert in that. In the sense, what we do is, I'll be able to talk to the designers and prepare whatever is required for the manufacturing team. Since I've been working in the full life cycle, I know where the designers will fail, because sometimes the designers will want some lofty tolerances which no manufacturer can ever make. So I will work with both these teams and then give the manufacturer complete set of instructions, right from manufacturing instructions, operator training requirements, um, what do they need to create production, what type of batch records do we need. All this will be given to the manufacturing team. Now, in parallel, you will have your regulatory team. And now, many times what happens is, usually these are people who have done it for many years. It requires a lot of experience. These are the people who go to the FDA and see it gets approved. And that is a true art, because you may not be manufacturing ready, but what the FDA requires is due diligence, that you have gone through all the checks and balances, that you can make a product which will be able to be used by the patient without any patient harm. That is very important. Ultimately, the medical device industry, the most important thing, the risk is patient harm. You do not want any patient to be harmed with your product. So once they get you FDA approval, that is big thing. Medical device company, to get the FDA approval, that is big stuff. That's when the stock of the company will shoot through the roof. And that's when, all the engineers are working in it, they make their money. So next,
I also
okay, you,
showed the room and the students here. Do you see?
yes, 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 yes.
Oh, guys, can you say hi?
Hi, hi again. How are you? I hope, you're following what I'm
Some
telling
are
you.
Yeah, we have this like presentation here that I put your presentation there. So please
Excellent.
go ahead.
Okay.
So I just want
Okay.
to see your audience because
No, I'm happy. They are there watching it.
yeah.
Next one is another phase which I'm a subject matter expert in this area is what we call production and process validation. This is again a big thing. What we do is, many times you may be creating a product, but that particular product, you may need equipment, right? You need equipment to make that work. There are many processes in medical device companies which are very, very primitive. You still have hand processes. You'll find catheters being glued by hand,
No way.
uh, because it is what happens is there's a lot of care has to go into it, and I don't think they really automated the catheter manufacturing process. They still glue them by hand, and you'll have operators sitting down, and they are prima donnas. We have done it for so many years; they're really good at it, and you will see them doing it. At the same time, on the other hand, you'll have highly automated lines, and I've worked on both. You'll have highly automated lines where you just put a product in at one end, it'll come out as a finished product on the other end. Actually, one of my first jobs on this, I worked for a company like Bayer. Most of you must have heard about Bayer. Bayer at that time used to make this HbA1c cartridge. What the HbA1c cartridge is that it looks at your blood glucose level over a period of 3 months and it will give a reading. It gives a history of that. They were in Mishawaka, Indiana at that time, and I was with them for 2.5 years. And this was a dream line, a dream for a mechanical engineer. You could just store the product at one end, and you will get finished product at the other end, and in a shift they would be producing about 20,000 cartridges, all robots and machine vision and everything else, and a truly engineer's dream. I worked with them for about 2.5 years, and subsequently they sold to Siemens, not with the Bayer anymore, but that is where I cut my teeth. And when I'm talking about production process validation, is what happens is there are 2 or 3 stages, and I'll go deeper into it. You'll have to do installation qualification for the equipment. You'll have to do operational qualification. We are challenging the limits, and you'll have to do process qualification, like run about 3 or 4 batches, and then see that it produces parts and meets the process capability. Again, those are standards you establish prior to releasing it. You will say that you want 4 sigma in your process or 1.33 CPK, and you ask for that. And till that is done, you don't sign off on the validation report. And we are very strict on that, because once it goes out, you can't stop it, and you don't want a recall. So ultimately, after all this is done, the product is the patient. Your job is not done, because then you have what is called post-market surveillance. You'll have to see that this particular product, there are no complaints. And if there are complaints, I'm sure there will be, you have to handle them right away. You have to come and handle it, and I'll go deeper into it down the line. Now, one important thing I want to talk about before we go into the modules is the regulations. The whole medical device industry in the US and throughout the world is governed by regulations. In the US, we call it the FDA. The FDA oversees this, and it's called the Code of Federal Regulations. Uh, we follow that, and the international market, they follow the ISO 13485. However, the good news is both of these are aligned. If you know one, you will definitely be able to work on the other one. They have aligned it now. They are pretty close, some minor differences, but the US is actually moving more towards, uh, harmonizing everything with ISO 13485. So that is an international standard. I won't go too deep into this because you can read about this, but basically what it gives you is certain guidelines of the type of documentation you need for each and every section of manufacturing. They will give you guidelines. So what the companies do is they will use these guidelines and they will create their own procedures. In each company will have their own procedure. However, what happens is some companies get too deep into it and create procedures which cannot be followed, and they get stuck with that. That is where again I say, that as engineers, we'll have to be smart in looking at what the Code of Federal Regulations or the ISO 13485. What is the intent, design intent? Because I always talk about design intent. Sometimes the quality engineer may blow that out of proportion and make it a very complicated document. But if you understand design intent, you can go and challenge their assumptions so that you don't have to waste time on non-essentials, but you can concentrate on the product. Here again, I will split this into two. I'm sure you'll get this presentation. You can go deeper into it. But these are all published by the FDA and ISO 13485. But the company you will work for will have very detailed documentation for each and every one that will split into standard operating procedures. They will have templates for it, particularly the larger companies. But if you're in a startup, you may create everything yourself. Okay, this is the first module of the product development process where we go through the concept and feasibility. You basically define an unmet clinical need or market opportunity. Then you conduct some preliminary research on clinical workflow, competitive landscape, and potential technologies. Then you perform your feasibility studies. Now we talk about here the ISO 14971, which is a pre-assessment, and the next slide will talk a little bit deeper into that. So this is the time you perform your early proof of concept, and then you have a certain output where you will have the proof of concept ready. You can go to your management and then get approval from them. Or if you're the startup, you're the founder, you say, okay, my pocketbook can take it, and you go and bite the bullet. Now, this is, I've given you a write up about risk management. The medical device companies are very fond of this. Particularly quality engineers, they get all hung up over risk management. But in simple words, it's very simple. Look at it this way. Uh, you are talking about patient harm. You are identifying the hazard. If there is a hazard with the patient, which can harm the patient, either in the design or in your process. So what you do is you look at the hazard and say, what is the severity of the hazard? You grade it. Let's say a grade of 1 to 10. You look at the severity of the hazard, saying, like death or some trauma or anything like that. You have a certain severity which the company decides. Company makes that. FDA doesn't tell you how to do that, but the company will do that. And then you look at the probability. What is the probability that can happen in my product? Like, you may have certain controls and other things. You may be doing certain inspections. You may had very good design process. So you look at the probability and you come to a design a risk level. Once you have this risk level, everything you do on your product, you go by risk level. So what you say is, my risk is very low. So I don't think because it is not really possible. You cannot make everything 100% perfect, because then you will do it forever. You will never get your product out. So that is why the FDA also talks about risk. They say, what is your risk? And you be diligent per the risk. There is no point going after something where the risk is extremely low, but really control the high risk. So again, I've given you all the components of this, but in essence, it is really about determining the risk. And you can use your engineering judgment for that, your experience, your previous history, and arrive at the risk. And in essence, that is all risk management is all about. Now we come to the ideation phase. This is, like basically the FDA doesn't tell you how to do this, but this is how you do it as an engineer. Is first of all, I think you pick your idea. And once your idea comes in, you do probably a couple of iterations from your first idea. You may look at it and you may make some modifications. And then the other theory on this is make your mistakes fast. This is an engineering trick. What happens is sometimes you may want to make this perfect fixture. I know I was in one project where one of my colleagues, he wanted to make this perfect fixture and it took 6 months. And after 6 months, we found that the fixture did not work. So what I'm trying to say is it's always good to do perfect work, but at the same time, you have to make your mistakes fast so you can find where your problems could be. And also make quick prototypes. Initially, don't wait to make again the perfect fixture, the perfect part. Try to find whatever is out there already so that you can assemble a quick prototype and test it and get data. Because once you get data, you will know where your weakness is. And that is very important when you want to go on a fast track. Many companies get stuck in this and they have project delays. And ultimately, what happens is the end date will never change. So all the time lost in the beginning, you will have to make up in the end. And then what happens when you do that is you won't do enough diligence to the product. The product will go out without enough testing. Until ultimately, you will have a failure. So that is where all the quick prototypes will help you a lot. And another decision you make during the ideation phase: Do you buy or do you build? There are advantages in building in-house. There are advantages in buying. Sometimes if you have two or three suppliers, it is good to buy. But if there's only one supplier for there for that particular part, it's a little risky to buy from only. If they go out of business, you will have trouble. So sometimes you may have to have a parallel path or build yourself. And then another thing is to leverage prior art. What I mean by this is a lot of people have done all these projects, right? Many of these technologies are already out there. So whatever is out there, try to study them, try to understand them so that you can use as much on your process and you can save your time and you can get ahead to market. And the most important thing in engineering is concurrent engineering. What I mean by concurrent engineering is everybody likes to do it in a sequential pattern. But what happens is, let's say you have a design engineer, you have a process engineer, a manufacturing engineer, and a quality engineer. Now, if you do everything sequentially, then towards the end you won't have time. So initially involve the whole team and tell them where you're going so that many of them with their experience they will start creating the documents ahead of time. They may even create the inspection plans ahead of time. They will plan for the equipment ahead of time. These are all small things which help you get ahead with your project. Now this is again a simple thing about new product introduction is you may be either improving an existing product or creating a new product or doing a variation of a product. Plus, at that time, as an engineer, you are trained in a certain way, but you may be working for a startup, or you may be working for a medium sized company, or you may be working for the top 10. Each company, what will happen is they have a different culture, right? So it is good to adapt to their culture. The reason I say that is because a small company may have certain constraints. They may not be able to follow initially, do everything by the book. You may have to wear many hats. You may have to be not only the design engineer but the process engineer, the manufacturing engineer, and the quality engineer. You may have to learn many things at short notice. So, depending on the company, you have to modify your style. In a medium company, of course, they will be a little more, uh, cross-functional members, so they will be able to help you out. Of course, in a big company, top 10, they go do it by the book, and here you will may even be put in a slot. Sometimes there are advantages and disadvantages. But the good news is here sometimes life could be boring, but what you do there is you try to learn what is being done by the other revisions. And sometimes what happens is you may get so bored that people get frustrated. But what that is where I started doing my own projects. So I start training myself on my own projects, wherein I can learn new technology so that I am one step ahead. So I'm ready to make the move whenever the time comes. Now, I'm going to deviate a little bit here. I'm doing a project which I started about 6 weeks ago. I call it the Universal Vitals Project. Actually, it actually started with a competition with Chow or Seed Studios doing with some of their sensors. And we created a set of projects. The reason for these projects is a lot of students come to me wanting new projects. They want to train on the FDA system. They want to completely get up to speed on it so that when they go and start working for medical device companies where there are a lot of jobs, they will already know the process. So I built a set of projects and I will go through some of them towards the end. But these are basically a lot of them are, they are involved with remote patient monitoring, which is a big thing nowadays. The key is that the insurance companies are slowly realizing that people go to the physicians and a lot of money is spent on insurance, medical care. But they say, why not we look at monitoring the patients even before they go and help them control or improve their health? So if you're able to do that, that's half the game one, right? You're able to make people healthier even before they get sick. So my Universal Vitals project really deals with that, diagnosis. Diagnosis, not even at the doctor's point, but doing diagnosis yourself. You have your tools, you diagnose yourself and you improve yourself. And that is what this deals about. And some of this may not even require FDA clearance. So that's a bonus. Yeah, the FDA allows you to do certain products where they don't insist that you need a clearance. Now we go to what is called the user requirement definition. Now you have a concept. Now you go into drafting the user requirement specification. This is a very important part of any medical device development. You'll be surprised to know that I have been to startups where they were ready to validate, and when I asked them for a user requirement specification, they did not have it. They asked me, "What is it?" So again, nothing wrong in that. They were brilliant designers, right? They had a fantastic product, but nobody told them about it. No, the seriousness about this, because when you go to validate the product, you need to know the specifications, right? You have to test the product. So the user requirements, what it will talk about is it talks about the user need, the intended use, the indications for the use, which is called they call the IFU. And you'll find IFU with every product you buy. You'll find IFU. You may have seen it in some of the simpler products also. What it does is they will translate the critical workflow into user requirement specifications. Then you will also have a risk management file as part of it, a design development plan, and then you will have the whole thing as a package. But again, it doesn't happen everywhere. Sometimes we go as a validation engineers, we'll go and create it toward the end of the project. But if you can create at the beginning of the project, it does not take much time because you're doing it anyway as part of your drawings and other things. So you can easily create it. And this is the second module. And I'm going here into a little of the definition, what is the user need, what the user wants to achieve. Intended use is what the device generally does. And the indication of use is the specific clinical conditions. And you have to include, the condition of purpose of the IF, is it for diagnosis or is it for monitoring or is it for therapy? The kind of patient groups it will be involved with, the type of environment where you will be using your product, and the limitations. You always have to say if there is a exclusion or a limitation, you have to state it so that people don't use your device for the wrong use. The third module is the system and design input definition. This is where you define your inputs, your functional performance, your safety regulatory requirements, which I talked about earlier. And in all this, we have standards. And in the next page, I will go and tell you what all these standards are about. The good news is, anytime you develop a medical device, for every area of that, you have a specific standard. So you have to refer to the standard so that you can see that your device conforms to the standard. So I will go into detail on this standard, tell you what each and every standard here is. And then you have to establish measurable and verifiable parameters. This is an interesting area is because when I told you about the designers will ask for certain tolerance. Now, if you cannot achieve that tolerance or if you cannot even measure that tolerance is no use, right? So as a designer, you will have to establish something which can be measured. There is a test instrument to measure that, and then you can test it. And then, of course, at this stage, you have a complete document, which what they call the design input document. Now, we go through the standards. IEC 60601 deals with electrical safety and performance. IEC 62304 deals with medical device software lifecycle. I think a lot of engineers now are really well into software. And I think this is an important area because the software lifecycle, uh, let's say you have automated equipment. I've seen people, they will go and change the code. They'll keep updating the code on the machine. When you do this, you don't have any traceability. Why was it changed? What is the reason it was changed? So IEC 62304 will give you all the standards for how you make that happen. And the next one is what I can try to say. Okay, ISO 10993 is for biological evaluation. This is biocompatibility testing. Let's say silicon, Silicon, I think, is compatible with the human skin. But there are some plastics or some material which are not compatible. So anytime you develop it, you have to do biocompatibility testing. You have to do a certain type of test to see that there is no damage to the human body when you use this. IEC 62366 deals with usability engineering, which comes to human factors and user interface design. And then all these standards are integrated with ISO 13485. So they're all part and parcel of the main standard, so that once you see that you conform to these standards, you will be following the regulations. Now here I talk a little about system overview, and I'm trying to take some examples. So you understand now when we go to a system overview, I showed you some of the projects I am working with, like the millimeter wave radar module. What is it used for? No, that is used for vital signs extraction. And then we have a vision module. We're using media pipe, which studies skeletal posture, facial landmarks, skin color analysis. Again, this is, you describe your system when you do a new medical device. As for a system, you sort of, look at an overview of the system. You have to describe what all it is going to extract, what all it's going to identify. And I've just talked a little about that, and I've talked about the type of software you can use, and ultimately a little bit of really a tip there. Sometimes you may try to use all the latest software and get stuck up front, but try to use simple tools up front when you're developing, so that you can concentrate on the actual process throughout the process, before you go and try out all the fancy software. Those are really nice in the end, but initially when you're doing your proof of concept, or trying to get a process up and running, the simpler tools work much better. Here I am talking about functional requirements. In the projects we were doing, we have talked about using sensors for gait analysis, uh, and basically we thought, let us look at some sort of type of functional requirement. These are just example functional requirements, but for each product you do, you will define your own functional requirements. What is it supposed to do? Because sometimes you may just have a functional requirement, you may not know the type of equipment you need for it. So you'll have to go to a system integrator and tell them, this is what I want my equipment to be able to do. So they will be able to decide on the type of equipment needed to produce that particular component, or they may be able to give you alternatives of what can do that, because there will be different types of products in the market, but your functional requirements will help you choose those components. This is the fourth phase, where you do your design and development. This is your prototyping stage. Here you're developing the actual prototypes for mechanical, electric, and software. Many times you may be making them in modules. You may be having the mechanical equipment being done by one company, the software integration being done by another company, or the mechanical engineers may be designing the shell. The electrical engineers may be looking at the type of PLC to be used, and the software engineers may decide on the vision integration. So you'll be developing these various modules, and ultimately you have to integrate them together. They all come together. You may have to do some bench testing on them to see that they meet your requirements. And then you have to maintain what is called a design history file. The FDA is really very keen on this. The design history file, in their mind, if something is not documented, it is not done. So they want you to have a very good history and traceability right from the input stage. So you have to, many companies will have what is called a traceability matrix. It's nothing very complicated. All that it says is this particular user requirement, number one, was taken care of in this particular place. So they trace the whole thing. So this design history file will give a complete history of the design of the whole project, so that anytime later on, if you have an issue, you can go back and say, where did we fail, or where did we do due diligence, so that you can do some root cause and correct it. So the idea of documentation, even though many times we feel the FDA or companies overdo this documentation, there is really a method to the madness. It helps you in the long run. So the design history file is a very, very important part of any medical device manufacturer and your design process. And your output, of course, of all this is what your like your regular mechanical drawing, your schematics, your software code. At this point, these are what your design outputs are. Next, we come to design verification. We talked about it earlier. You're really verifying that your outputs meet your design inputs, and you're conducting your bench test. We talked about IEC 62304 earlier, and then you document it, because the documentation again is very important. Whatever you have done, you have to document it, and you have to make a summary report. This summary report is what auditors from FDA will come and ask for. This is one of the first things they will ask for is, where are your summary reports? Because they know that this contains all the work done during design verification. And the next is the design validation. We talked about the difference between design verification and validation. Here you are validating that the product meets the user need and the intended use. You're conducting your clinical evaluation, your usability studies, and the environmental tests. Then you're performing the design review, design validation review, and again, your final summary report. So these are all what we call certain stages in the development. At your design verification, your summary report, design validation, summary report. And usually the design engineers and the manufacturing engineers will be involved with this, will get them vetted by the quality engineers, because you really need some checks and balances. We know we do our job very well, but it's always good to have an external party, a party who's not involved in your process, verify those. So the checks and balances will be there to be sure everything is taken care of, so that there are nothing has slipped between the cracks. Now you come to design transfer, which I really love, which you're going to take all the documentation, and then you're going to interface with the manufacturing team. You're going to transfer the whole thing to manufacturing. They have what is called a device master record. This is really is, it will sometimes be a huge binder. Nowadays, everything is in electronic databases. This will have all the requirements required for a manufacturer to manufacture it, because there are times when you may manufacture it in-house, or there are times when you may manufacture it with a system, with an outside original equipment manufacturer, or have a subcontractor to do it for you, or you may have another manufacturer in another country do it for you. You may have US manufacturing, you may have overseas manufacturing. So the device master record will give all the information required to manufacture that product. Plus, it will also have a bill of materials. So with all this, a manufacturer, once he has all the information, they can go and do their process validation. It will also have information for the type of process validation required, because you have to tell them the type of validation you require, because you have to give them your standards, and they will produce it per your requirements. And again, this you have this whole output, it's a whole package. It takes time to make it, but once you have done it well, it helps your manufacturing, and you will have a very smooth manufacturing operation. Now, next, you're doing all this in parallel. We talked about concurrent engineering earlier. As you're doing all this, your regulatory team, they would have started making all the documentation. They would have talked to all the stakeholders. They would have talked to all the teams. They would have started creating all the required documents for the FDA. You'll hear them talk about the 510K submission, which is a big deal for all these companies. And many times it will go to the FDA. It may even come back with questions. But again, due diligence is all that it's required. If your initial homework was good, this team will find, for them it's a piece of cake. Because if you've done your work at every stage, for them it's very easy, because all the information is there. So they can go and submit it and you will get it. And this is the time time once they get it, the company parties, because it's really a big thing, and everybody is really happy at this stage. Then they can get into the real manufacturing. Now we come to the production and process validation process. I've done quite a bit of this over the last few years, and I'll go through each one of them individually. The first stage is what you call the installation qualification, operational qualification, process qualification. The installation qualification, it's not really understood, because what happens is, let's say you have an automated piece of equipment. That has to come in and installed in the shop floor. But even before you do your IQ, you would have probably accepted it at the manufacturer. At that time, you have done a factory acceptance test. Then you have brought it to the site, you have done a site acceptance test. Now, the FDA does not talk about those things because those are something you do to protect your IQ. Because when it comes in, before you start your IQ, if you're a good manufacturing engineer, if you're a good process engineer, you would have done your homework. Because you want to know once you've installed it and you've gone and done your installation qualification, it passes up front. This is where I recommend what are called dry runs, because many times people will go into the test and they will fail. But once it fails, it takes you twice the amount of time to correct it. So if you have done some, due diligence and done some dry runs, or sometimes you can leverage your factory acceptance test and your site acceptance test and see all these things are completed there. So when you do your IQ, again, it's a cakewalk. You can just go in and, you can just go and do it. Everything will check out. When you come to your OQ, you need to know your process. And this is where real engineering comes in. Take a simple process like lamination. The process parameters for lamination is time, temperature, and pressure. But you will find such a simple process can become complicated because when you use adhesives, you may use adhesives from different companies. Each adhesive has a certain characteristic. So you have to nail in at a very good nominal for time, temperature, and pressure. So this is where your engineering studies are very important. So even before your so-called OQ, your real work is done during engineering studies. When you do a designed experiments, you come to a very, very rigid nominal. And again, the reason you do OQ is, for one thing, as equipment ages, your your process, it'll go drift a little. Nothing like even temperature. Take a temperature control. It doesn't stay put, right? There is a lower limit and an upper limit. So during your process, there will be a certain drift. So you want to be sure when you do your operational qualification, you challenge the process to the limits. If you have challenged the process to the limits, then you know your process will work under any condition. So what I always say is, if your IQ and OQ is done well, your process qualification again is a piece of cake. Because you can guarantee, you can literally go to the shop floor, okay, you can run it, it'll work. But if you have not done your homework, there will be problems. And then again, it takes twice or three times the amount of time to correct problems, because once you've failed on a process, you have to go back and rewrite all these reports. You have to go and redo everything. You'll have find root cause for why you failed. It becomes very, very laborious. So the more work you do upfront in any process, right from your URS, right from your design verification, right from your factory acceptance, all these play into these processes. But this is where you can save time by your work upfront. And then another important thing, once you have done all this, you need to have what is called quality control test. Because let's say you are getting parts or a material from a supplier. Now you have to know that whatever is coming in from the supplier meets your specification. So you have to establish certain quality control tests. So that is what is called incoming uh, quality control test. Now, when you're running your process, things can fail, right? Any process can fail. So even when you're running at your process, you may have 10 stages in your process. At every stage, you may have to have your quality control test. Nowadays, of course, with all the modernization and the AI available, you know, all your like your vision there, you can, completely automate these tests. It's a dream now. Earlier, I've been on manual inspection where we had one line where we had 30 inspectors inspecting diabetes test sensors. So we had these 30 people, and it was very hard on their eyes. And they would have to inspect everything manually. And then what happened was, what we proposed computer vision inspection. Then the company came and asked us, you're going to run 30 people out of work. And they said, can you justify it? I told them, look, this is what I'm going to do. We are going to increase the production of the company by 10%. I mean, 10 times. So when we increase it by 10 times, we will require 30 more operators. So all these people who are doing very difficult work with manual inspection will become operators and they'll earn 1.5 times that salary. So whenever the world, everybody talks about, they'll say AI will throw people out of work. As an engineer, I feel it will actually get more work, because as the world, I've seen it, right from the time secretaries lost their job, when word processing came in, secretaries lost their job, or draftsmen lost their job when CAD came in. Nobody really loses their job. Word actually gets better. There is more work available. So again, when I'm talking about quality control tests, right now, you can automate everything. That's where all your machine learning and your AI comes into play. Plenty of opportunity there to automate the whole test. And then we come to the third stage where you're uh, seeing that your suppliers are also qualified. Just like you qualify your process, you make sure that the suppliers are qualified. Because what the FDA says is, you cannot tell them that my supplier made a mistake. You are responsible for your supplier. You have to see that the supplier performs. So you have to see that they work to your standards. Many companies don't understand this. They give it to a supplier and think it is their problem. Not anymore. It is our problem. If you have a supplier, it's our problem. Then you will see medical device companies get very excited about CAPAs. Particularly when FDA auditors come in, they can close down a company for CAPAs not being updated on time. Anyway, CAPA is very simple. If you really break it down, all that it is corrective and preventive action. You have a problem, you'd go and do a root cause. You found out what your root cause is. As an engineer, you say, this is my root cause. This is how I can control it with an engineering control or a quality control. And once I've controlled it, how are you going to prevent it from happening again? That's all it is. It's just a small 2 or 3 steps, but you will find many companies fight with this. It's not really difficult with all the modern software available, with all the intelligence available in the world. I think modern engineers can go and really turn the medical device companies around, from where a product takes 2 years to go to market. I think the modern day engineers will be able to do it in 1 year. And that is my hope, because that is where technology will come in and make these companies more profitable. So if they won't really throw engineers out of jobs, they will actually create more medical devices, more need, or more modern processes, or more health, where even then, once people become more healthy, they will be able to afford more luxurious products. Or again, ultimately, it's a big gain. The faster we make these, the more the gain. And ultimately, after all this is done, of course, you have all your final reports and everything ready, and your audit will be bulletproof. I talk about it, not everybody believes me, but I think you can, when an auditor comes in, if you've done it right, you can smile. You don't have to get scared. And the final piece, sorry, my throat is getting a little hoarse. The final piece is what they call post-market surveillance. We talked about it earlier. You have to monitor. This is a separate group of people who have to be dedicated. This is one of the most important areas, because but not everybody realizes it. If you get a complaint, you have to attend to it immediately. There is no excuse. This is not something you can sit on your inbox. It is something you have to attend to it immediately. Find a root cause. Find a way to correct it. Feed it back into your CAPA system, and you follow up, because this is where many companies have had problems. With the FDA shutting them down, or you have market recalls that could have easily been avoided. But sometimes, some of these huge medical device companies those days thought nobody could touch them. And I've been in companies which were really big companies, which they were not told the FDA that that's how they will do it. And I was in a project where we spent 2 years trying to correct things because the FDA shut them down. Even simple things like reliability engineering, tolerances and other things were questioned. So it's very important to see, this is one of the most important areas in any company. And if you are in this area, it is a very, very serious business. We have to attend to it right away. But again, we've gone through these 10 modules. On the whole, it looks like a lot of work, but if you really look at it, if there is due diligence, it's like you doing your homework every day. If you do your homework every day, your tests are easy, right? Um, but sometimes we are still used to being in college. We can, do an all-nighter and crack it. But unfortunately, in the medical device world, an all-nighter sometimes does not work. You have to do it from day one. I think I've gone through all these modules, and then because we'll later on come to the areas where we talk about it. I think how are we doing on time, Madi?
So it's we have 25 minutes. So I don't know if you can have like 10 minutes for question and answers.
Yeah, and I think I won't take much time on this. These are all purely examples, you know, just about about the projects I'm doing. So that is something it is in the report. I I think we can give them even more time if they are interested in bringing out their projects. We can even give them a little more time. I'll just move through this a little fast. It is really examples of what I am doing, and more of what I call the fun projects I am doing to keep my brain energized. Now, this is what the gate analysis using the initial measurement unit and sound. I'm actually submitting this for a competition end of the month. Uh, Said Studio is having a competition, and all these are being submitted for the competition. And this is just some write-ups about that, the gate analysis. The next is, this is a dream product for me, wherein it's an existing algorithm, nothing new. You can, using media pipe, you can predict your heart rate. I don't think FDA has approved it as yet, but my theory is if you can predict heart rate and you test yourself as you predict it, and you get data for a couple of months, and you transfer that data, the glucose, let's say you take your glucose levels every day, look at your heart rate, and you transfer it, you train that data. I think there could be a correlation. It is a theory of mine, and I'm going to try it. It's a pet project of mine. Half the people have told me that it's a scam on my side. Not really. When you're doing research, it's not scam, because if you show data, it's not a scam anymore, right? So I'm going to have a couple of interns work on this. Let's see what happens. This one is another dream project. I actually have an intern working on this right now. She's a third year engineering student. And our theory again here is you can have a smartphone, scan your skin, and ultimately find out the glucose level. Again, there is a lot of research being done on it. There are a lot of data sets, but this is again not been done. I don't think anybody has got approvals. Again, this is something people may not believe it will ever happen, but many things have happened, right? And this is engineering. I'm sure, if you do enough research, if you get enough data, you can prove it. Of course, if your data tells you it won't work, it won't work. But I think if you there is enough work done it, I'm sure, it will work. Let us see. Only thing is, it may throw all the diabetes test strip manufacturers out of business, and we don't want that, do we? So this is again, whenever I do a project, now that we have Gemini working for us, as a friend, I try to tell Gemini what I need, and it creates a beautiful visual of the product which I will ultimately make. This is a computer generated image of my final product. I'm calling it a smart asset type system. The small capsules there are the devices which we can test equipment for vibration. You just stick it on a piece of equipment, and you can read the vibration value, so that you can do predictive maintenance. You can, when I'm talking about machine, and sometimes as a mechanical engineer, I think humans are also the same of machines, because everybody deteriorates over a period of time. And if you're looking at that vitals, and if you can predict failure before it happens, you're ahead of the game. So this is something I created more for the fun of it. This is one more, again, computer generated image. On the left, you see my main component, which is the microcontroller and the lipo cell. And on the right side, what I call an industrial pack. One of them is actually a tester. I actually developed that to test grocery store carts. Because anytime I go to the grocery store with my wife, my cart squeaks and everybody looks at us. So I don't really like the cart to squeak. So I thought I'll make a tester and give it to mayor or the grocery store manager so that they can test it up front and then repair them. This is another dream project of mine using the millimeter wave vitals measurement. On the left side is an off-the-shelf product I bought from Seed Studio. You can buy it on Amazon for $25. And what that will do is from 5 feet away, it will tell you your heartbeat and breathing rate, but it's not too reliable. So we bought the other one, which is more reliable, and we are working on that. That's another project. I'll probably have another intern working on that. This is another project we are doing with just the initial measurement unit and sound unit sensor. It's just like a stethoscope. We just placed it on our chest and try to look at the sound and determine a heartbeat. Again, I don't think FDA has approved something like this, but again, we can do it soon. This is a product which we came up with in the last couple of days for using the same instrument to balance your hearing. I'm deaf on one ear. I cannot hear on my right side. So if somebody calls me, I will turn around. So we hope, that having two of these, we can balance, the sound, but we don't know how it's going to work. We'll probably have some interns working on that as well. Here again, these are basically, some of the software part, nothing very important. It's basically part of the project, which you look at anyway. So I think I will turn it over to the students now for their ideas. I have a link here. If you get this presentation, please look at that link. That particular link talks about remote patient monitoring, and they're looking for proposals. So you will get an idea of what the market wants, because they are actually looking for proposals even without FDA approval. And maybe in your college year, you could create one of this. So now we look for your ideas, products you want to do, and your questions, and I'm completely open for that.